Hey y'all, it's Kim. So I've been going through a lot of different documents. I happened to see several times on like Instagram and even X that people said that the Jews were responsible for 9/11. And I'm like, I've never heard that before. I mean, up until recently, we've always assumed that it was the Al Qaeda people, and Osama bin Laden even wrote a letter to America and said that they were responsible for because they were being, that their people had been killed prior to even 9/11. And so this is from PolitiFact. It's the Poynter Institute. This was something that Chat GPT gave me when I asked why do people, pretty much think that Jews had something to do with it. And so far, I'm just not seeing it. But this is from Sierra O'Rourke, and this is November 10th, 2023. And it says Al Qaeda terrorists were responsible for September 11th attacks, not the Jews or Israel. And then it just says if your time is short, Al Qaeda terrorists were responsible for the September 11th, 2001 attacks, not Jews or Israel. And then we can look at the sources, but I want to kind of read some of this. It says Al Qaeda terrorists were responsible for the September 11, 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon, but conspiracy theories implicating other culprits continue to abound on social media. And they're still today doing it. I think I had somebody on Monday post something. But it was a November 1st Instagram post, for example, declared in the caption that Jews did 9/11. It was flagged as part of Meta's efforts to combat false news and misinformation on its news feed. And then it says read more about partnership with Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram. It says this is a long time and unfounded claim. Let's see. In May 2009, the State Department addressed it and other prominent conspiracies, including that 4,000 Jews failed to show up for work at the World Trade Center on the day of the attacks, suggesting that they were involved in orchestrating them. It says some 10 to 15% of the World Trade Center victims were Jewish, according to the State Department, and Al Qaeda leaders, including Osama bin Laden, have repeatedly confirmed that they planned and carried out the September 11th attacks. The Anti-Defamation League wrote in 2021 that such claims are a continuation of centuries-old anti-Semitic tropes about Jews supposedly manipulating events for their own benefit, and we rate claims that Jewish people or Israel are responsible for 9/11 as pants on fire. And then here's just a bunch of sources. It says how the 9/11 attacks helped shape the modern misinformation conspiracy theory industry. That's PolitiFact, Instagram post, the top secret or September 11th conspiracy series, and the 4,000 Jews rumor, America.gov. And then I've already gone through this one, anti-Semitic conspiracies about 9/11 endures 20 years later. Let's see what this says, PolitiFact here. Let me make sure there's nothing else on here. Okay. So let's take a look at this. This is how the 9/11 attacks helped shape the modern misinformation and conspiracy theory industry. Yeah, as seen from the New Jersey Turnpike near Kearny, New Jersey, smoke billowed from the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York after airplanes crashed into both towers on September 11th, 2001. This is Billy McCarthy. If you're short on time, the sudden terrorist attacks on September 11th seemed to defy explanation and occurred just as the internet started to boom. That combination spawned various conspiracy theories and made them accessible in new ways. The attacks also fueled distrust in government and fears of real and perceived enemies. Experts said the feeling of lost trust and security likely made some Americans more susceptible to conspiracy theories about 9/11 and other topics. One key accelerator of the 9/11 truth movement was an amateur documentary released online in 2005, which created a template for future videos such as Plandemic. Outside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, a New Jersey man held up his hand for a camera as he told a local TV reporter about the chaotic scene he just witnessed inside the building. His palm was smeared with blood that belonged to Ashley Babbitt, the woman fatally shot by law enforcement as she tried to force her way further into the Capitol. It could have been me, but she went in first. Thomas Bariani, 29, said in the interview. I don't know what this has to do with 9/11, but whatever. Okay, so Bariani said he entered the Capitol to tell Congress that we need some kind of investigation into this, suggesting that, like many of the rioters who tore through the building, he believed this false narrative that the election was stolen from former President Donald Trump. It wouldn't have been Bariani's first time falling for false information. 10 years earlier, he had latched onto another bogus conspiracy theory. According to a childhood friend who spoke to Insider, he had come to believe that the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001 were staged and part of a false flag operation. Scholars who study conspiracy theories say that that kind of through line is familiar. People who believe in one conspiracy theory are more likely to believe in others, said Karen Douglas, a professor of social psychology at the University of Kent in the UK, United Kingdom. But with his 9/11 views, Bariani is not alone. 20 years after the attacks shocked the world and left thousands dead, various conspiracy theories questioning the official narrative continue to captivate some Americans. The attacks and their aftermath also helped reshape and, in some ways, turbocharge the misinformation and conspiracy theory industry, encouraging people to turn to the internet for answers, demonstrating the power of pandemic style videos, fueling distrust of powerful institutions like the FBI, the intelligence community, and the mainstream media, stoking fears of real and perceived enemies, including immigrants, Muslims, and the surveillance state, and heightening a feeling of lost control everywhere from airports to ball games. It is a watershed, a landmark in the history of conspiracy theories, says Kathy Olmsted, a professor of history at the University of California at Davis, and the author of a book on conspiracy theories from World War II to 9/11. You see an acceleration of previous trends, if not a whole new age of conspiracy theories after 9/11. The post 9/11 world saw the rise of conspiracy theories claiming that President Barack Obama wasn't born in the US, that he was a Muslim born in Kenya and schooled in a madrasa, don't know what that is, that the Sandy Hook school massacre and other mass shootings didn't happen, and that a child sex trafficking ring tied to Hillary Clinton was operating out of a pizza shop, that Trump was waging a secret war against an elite group of pedophiles, and that the coronavirus pandemic was a hoax, and the COVID-19 vaccine carried microchips, and that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. It was more than coincidence that such beliefs thrived post 9/11. In several ways, 9/11 planted the seeds for today's thicket of misinformation, according to experts who study the history of politics and psychology behind conspiracy theories. But I'll tell you one thing, we're here in 2025 and some of this stuff has been proven. Just saying. They've investigated some of these things. So this was in 2023 and we're in 2025. So some of it's kind of like, who knows at this point. I'm not saying that I fully believe everything going on, but it's like some things have been debunked. We'll just call it that. Okay, so a world changing event, searching for explanations in times of crisis. A conspiracy theory is an attempt to explain an event with claims that small groups of sinister or powerful people are working in secret, usually against the common good. It's a theory because you can't necessarily prove it, and it's a conspiracy because there's another explanation for how things are occurring, said Mark Finster, a professor of law at the University of Florida and author of a book on American conspiracy theories. People gravitate to conspiracy theories for several reasons, including their need to know the truth and feel safe, said Douglas, who studies the psychology of conspiracy theories. The loss of trust in established institutions make people more inclined to accept misinformation and conspiracy theories, especially about crises that seem inexplicable. And let me stop for a second. My whole thing with this conspiracy theory aspect is I think the CIA came up with the term, coined it to basically make people sound crazy. But sometimes when there's a lack of information and a lack of transparency, and I know for security purposes, sometimes can't do it, but still, if there's a lack of information, that's where all this stuff comes out, where people are just like, we need answers and y'all aren't giving it to us. So it kind of in a vacuum or whatever when there's an absence of credible information, but then we've been lied to so much and stuff comes out eventually, everything comes out in the wash, or, like they say, the sunlight's the best disinfectant. It's almost like sometimes they act like it's conspiracy theory and then we're proven right on certain situations. So that's my take on it. Let's keep reading. Okay, conspiracy theories did not originate with the September 11th attacks, of course. They've surrounded sudden crises throughout history, such as the attack on Pearl Harbor that dragged the U.S. into World War II, a few weeks after John F. Kennedy's assassination, and the point blank killing of his suspected assassin. About 50% of Americans believed it was the work of conspiracy rather than a lone gunman, said Joseph Usinski, I guess, a professor of political science at the University of Miami and author of conspiracy theories. By the mid 1970s, that belief had taken hold among 80% of Americans. The JFK assassination conspiracy theories were very popular in the 1970s, Olmsted said, but to really engage with and investigate them, you had to go to conferences. You had to join a group where they would physically meet. Some people even traveled to Dallas. The theories born out of September 11th were different because they were the first to spread in the internet age, Olmsted said. That made them easier to share for conspiracy theorists who once had to pester people with flyers to disseminate information about their worldviews. And these are firefighters working near the site of the World Trade Center after the terrorist attack on September 11th. Okay, and the 9/11 really was the real hinge point between conspiracy theories being a fringe message board and talk radio phenomenon, a mainstream issue that we're still dealing with today, said Mike Rothschild, the author of a book on the baseless QAnon conspiracy theory. He added 9/11 was massive, world-changing event that seemed to divide explanation, a petri dish for conspiracy theories. And it happened at the same time as the internet was becoming a commonplace and everyday method of communication. The 9/11 conspiracy theories, some of which live on with groups such as Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, were wide ranging. They said that Al Qaeda wasn't responsible, that the military and intelligence community stood down, or that it was an inside job, that the buildings collapsed from a controlled demolition, that jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, that no Jewish people died, that no plane hit the Pentagon, and there were no planes at all, just holograms. Okay, broadly speaking, the theories fell into two categories, Finster said. There were those that said people in power let it happen, and those that said made it happen on purpose. The earliest fringe claims suggesting the attacks weren't what they seemed popped up almost immediately after the plane struck the Twin Towers. More elaborate theories soon circulated in Europe before seeping into the U.S. mainstream. Just 2 months after the attacks, President George W. Bush urged the United Nations to never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Yet, the mid-2000s, such theories were entrenched enough that the State Department devoted a web page to addressing them. The 9/11 Commission's final report took them on in 2004. And a year later, the magazine Popular Mechanics published a special issue debunking them. The theories drew interest from Hollywood celebrities. In 2012, actors Martin Sheen and Woody Harrelson were planning on making a film about them, according to The Guardian, although their project never made it to the big screen. It is extremely difficult to dislodge or anticipate conspiracy theories once they start, Jamie Gorelick, a member of the 9/11 Commission, told the Wall Street Journal in 2020. Do your own research, setting a blueprint for the digital age. There's no evidence that higher percentage of people believe in conspiracy theories today than before the September 11th attack, said Usinski, who has conducted polling on conspiracy theories for years. Other experts who spoke to PolitiFact agreed the raw numbers haven't spiked. And yet the experts agreed it certainly feels like the grip of conspiracy theories on Americans is worse than it is or has ever been, with political leaders and influential media figures indulging them widely and news organizations like PolitiFact covering them closely. The January 6th insurrection was fueled by beliefs that the election was stolen, and prominent public figures like Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has supported QAnon, and many other conspiracy theories, including September 11th, have drawn elevated attention to them. This is Jacob Anthony Chansley, 34, of Arizona, known as the QAnon Shaman, attends the rally in support of former President Donald Trump before storming the Capitol on January 6th in 2020 in Washington. The internet and social media seem to have brought conspiracy theories out of the shadows, making them feel more visible and prevalent, if not more credible. And 9/11 truthers refine the blueprint for how to harness those technologies. For people who are already inclined toward conspiracy theories, it is easier now to find them and become embedded in conspiracy communities more quickly, Douglas said. Conspiracy theories have always been with us and people have always believed them. However, the means of finding and sharing conspiracy theories has certainly changed. In the years since September 11th, online misinformers associated with QAnon, COVID-19, anti-vaccine activism, and other recent movements have used social media platforms such as Facebook to propagate information, communicate in groups, and make a quick buck. One way of doing so, by encouraging people to do your own research, can be traced back to 9/11, Olmsted said. Even more so than conspiracy theories in the past, today's conspiracy theories say nothing is as it seems, Olmsted said. You have to do your own research, and so all of that, I think, is an extension of the way that the 9/11 truthers approach the world. The phenomenon is apparent with QAnon. I really don't know much about this QAnon. I've heard of it. I don't know what it is. Okay, whose followers claim to believe that a secret cabal of cannibalistic, okay, that's what it is. Satan worshiping pedophiles is running the world. I mean, there's some freaky people out there. We still don't have the Epstein list in 2025, so I'm just going to throw that out there. Okay, and that Trump is the savior. Adherents to the theory consider themselves digital soldiers, and they believe the anonymous post on fringe internet forums from the person known as Q are clues for them to decode. The September 11th attacks are not mentioned much by Q, but believers of the theory take it as a given that the attacks were a false flag perpetrated by the government, Rothschild said. For them, it's just common knowledge. After the September 11th attacks, when the U.S. scaled up its powers for the war on terror, conspiracy theorists associated with QAnon or other movements continued framing major crises and violent events as false flags meant to justify the expansion of government powers, Rothschild said. The government, they warned, will go to any length to enact martial law, confiscate guns, or control and track the population with mask mandates and microchips and vaccines. There is the before and after picture of what the government looks like after 9/11, Fenster said. The expansion of the global war on terror and the surveillance state that is part of that is a nightmare for every conspiracy theorist. It doesn't justify conspiracy theories, but it does provide some credibility for them by allowing the development of a state that looks very much like a state that would engage in conspiracy or that would be the tool for conspiratorial actors. I want to stop it here and then probably finish up in just a few minutes. So I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.